When the noise of the day finally fades and, you're just alone in the quiet of the night, have you ever felt this deep, unshakable yearning for absolute truth?
Oh, that exact feeling.
Right. Like the smartphone screen is finally off, the notifications have stopped, and you're just left with your own thoughts.
Is sitting in the dark.
Exactly. And amidst all this technological overload, the loud opinions, and just the sheer volume of competing worldviews out there, you might find yourself asking, like, is there one path, one underlying reality that is actually fundamentally true?
It is a profound, completely universal human experience.
Hmm.
And what's fascinating here is that the framework we are exploring today takes that exact late-night anxiety and completely reframes it.
Reframes it how?
Well, it doesn't treat that yearning as some evolutionary glitch or a biological byproduct of an overactive brain. It treats it as a fundamental design feature.
The design feature, I love that.
Yeah, we're taking a deep dive today into a profoundly philosophical and theological worldview that explores whether there is a single, uncorrupted message amidst all this noise.
And it does something pretty unusual, right?
It does. It sets up a logical matrix. It provides a set of rational criteria to literally pressure test worldviews.
Have you ever felt that need to just test what you believe? Today, we are going to look at how this perspective maps out the history of religion. It presents pure monotheism, specifically through the lens of Islam, not as some brand new cultural invention, but as the final logical update to a very long chain of divine messages.
Right, an update to the system.
Exactly. And just to weave this in right from the start, because I think it's really important, our goal in this deep dive isn't to tell you what to believe today. We aren't here to, preach or endorse a specific theology.
No, not at all.
But we are going to actively pressure test this incredibly precise intellectual argument. We're going to see how it holds up.
Exactly. Because the core argument here is that a perfect creator wouldn't just leave humanity in the dark to guess at the truth.
Like some cosmic guessing game.
Right. There would be a clear, logically sound path that satisfies both the sharpest intellect and the deepest emotional needs. And it begins that path by identifying what it calls the seed of eternity.
The seed of eternity. That's a beautiful phrase.
It really is. It forcefully pushes back against the modern assumption that we are just cosmic accidents, highly evolved biological machines whose only purpose is to consume resources, reproduce, and then fade away.
Because if that were true, we would be perfectly content with just food, shelter, and entertainment.
We would be totally fine.
But we aren't. Think about your own life for a second. Have you ever chased a massive goal like a promotion, buying a house, achieving some huge milestone, convinced it would finally make you completely satisfied?
Oh, I think we've all been there.
Right. And then what happens? You feel this strange, hollow emptiness like a week after you get it.
Under this framework, that emptiness is your seed of eternity rejecting a temporary fix. There's a really striking poetic quote from earlier scriptures that illustrates this perfectly.
In the book of Ecclesiastes, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It notes that God has put eternity in their hearts. Because we have this infinite seed within us, the argument goes, nothing temporary or fleeting in this physical, bounded world can ever fully satisfy us.
We are quite literally built for something permanent.
We are.
I actually like to process this in tech terms. Yeah. Because it makes so much sense to me.
Okay, let's hear the tech analogy.
Think of your soul as hardware designed specifically to run a massive, infinite, eternal operating system.
Right.
But instead of running that native software, we keep trying to install these temporary, finite, earthly apps on it. Wealth, status, digital distractions.
Endless scrolling.
Exactly. It's like trying to run an infinite loop on a finite processor. Eventually, the memory maxes out and the system just crashes.
That makes total sense.
And that crash is the human experience of burnout and existential dread. So, okay, let's unpack this. If we possess this hardware with a built-in yearning for the infinite, what are we actually supposed to do with it?
Well, the answer provided here is rooted in a core concept called Ibadah. The worldview states that both humans and jinn, which, by the way, refers to an unseen species of beings with their own free will, were created only to serve or worship the Creator.
Okay, but we have to define that because the English translation of worship carries a ton of baggage.
Oh, a massive amount of baggage.
Yeah, people hear worship and they picture blind submission to a tyrannical ruler or just sitting in a dark room performing these repetitive, mindless rituals.
Precisely. But this philosophy argues it is much, much more expansive than that.
Yeah.
Ibadah is defined as a holistic alignment of your entire life to the ultimate truth.
Holistic alignment.
Right. It's about conscious recognition and deep voluntary love. Under this framework, every single good deed, a sincere smile you give to a stranger, the pursuit of scientific knowledge, or, even just doing your job with integrity.
That all counts.
All of it becomes an act of ibadah if the internal intention is to align with the Creator's will. It's about harmonizing your daily practical existence with the eternal purpose you were built for.
Wait, I'm struggling with that just a bit.
Okay, what part?
Well, if we are biologically and spiritually built for this perfect alignment, and there is a merciful creator who wants us to find it, why is the world such a confusing maze?
That is the big question.
Right. If you look at history, there are thousands of different religions, sects, philosophies. Did the creator just drop humanity into a labyrinth and say, good luck figuring it out?
No, not at all. And that's addressed head-on to the concept of continuous revelation. The argument is that the Creator never left humanity in the dark.
Okay.
Throughout history, a continuous chain of prophets and messengers was sent to different nations, figures you've probably heard of, like Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, Jesus, and finally Muhammad.
And the core message was the same for all of them.
Entirely identical, pure, indivisible monotheism, and a call to live a moral, just life.
There's an analogy here that I think is really helpful. The Prophet Muhammad actually described the prophets as being like half-brothers.
Yes, the half-brothers analogy is brilliant.
It's such a vivid way to look at history. Their mothers, which represent the outer laws, the specific daily rituals, the languages of their specific time and geographic culture, those were all different.
Because they were tailored to the specific people they were sent to, right?
Exactly. But their core religion, the central father line of pure monotheism, is identical.
Yes, and because of that, there is deep respect for this historical continuity. Followers of Judaism and Christianity are honored as al-Kitab, or people of the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it specifically points to the Hebrew Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, as a flawless, pure expression of the exact same monotheism taught by all prophets. The sparks of the original divine truth are still glowing brightly within those traditions.
I hear that, but logically, if the original messages from people like Moses or Abraham were already perfect expressions of monotheism, introducing a completely new book seems redundant.
I see where you're going with this.
Like, why did we need a new patch if the original code was flawless? Why do we need a new version if the old ones had the truth?
That is where the historical analysis becomes really critical. It points out that over centuries, those original messages underwent profound changes.
Just through time.
Time and human transmission. This wasn't necessarily out of malice, but you have massive gaps in oral tradition and translation errors as texts move from Hebrew to Aramaic to Greek to Latin. But the biggest distortion, it argues, was the integration of Hellenistic Greek philosophy.
How did Greek philosophy actually warp the theology, though? Because, on the surface, Greek philosophy is just logic and ethics, isn't it?
Well, it was their metaphysical framework. Greek philosophy at the time was heavily focused on the idea of demigods and the concept of logos, which they viewed as a divine mediator or a bridge between the perfect, untouchable spirit realm and the flawed physical world.
Right. The Greeks had all those pantheons where gods had children and interacted with the earth.
Exactly. So when early theologians tried to explain the message of Jesus to a massive pagan Roman Empire that was completely steeped in this Greek thought, they started adopting this Hellenistic framework.
Ah, I see. To make it more relatable.
Yes, they used the language of divine incarnation to make the religion palatable. Over time, a clear, simple message of submitting to one God became entangled in highly complex and, frankly, logically contradictory human dogmas about trinities and God-men.
So it's literally the ultimate game of historical telephone.
That's a great way to put it.
The original whisper from the prophets was perfectly clear, but after passing through hundreds of generations, political empires, and Greek philosophers, the fundamental message just got distorted.
Precisely. And that's why the update was needed. It wasn't sent as a brand new religion to compete with the others. It was sent as a final, uncorrupted update.
The Alfurquan.
Yes, the criterion or the touchstone used to distinguish truth from falsehood. It's a tool meant to strip away all those centuries of human additions and restore the original logical truth.
Which brings us to, I think, where it gets really interesting, how this framework actually defines that truth, because it establishes a logical matrix for testing any worldview.
It does.
Yeah.
It argues that truth cannot just be a matter of cultural taste or geographical accident.
Or blind faith.
Right. It has to be universal, logically compelling, and intellectually airtight.
And at the absolute center of this logical matrix is the concept of Tawhid, absolute, uncompromised divine unity. Like, chapter 112 of the Quran defines God as one absolute, independent, who neither begets nor is begotten, and who has absolutely no equal.
It is a complete and total rejection of anthropomorphism.
Giving God human traits.
Exactly. The idea of assigning human traits or literal family structures to the Creator, it views this as the most important philosophical correction in human history.
Because it just doesn't make logical sense otherwise.
Think about why biological reproduction even exists. It is a trait of mortal, needy beings who have to pass on their genetic legacy because they eventually die.
Right.
An eternal Creator, by definition, has no physical body, no end, and therefore absolutely no such need.
It's a massive category error. It's trying to apply a biological timeline to something that exists entirely outside of time and space.
Yes.
It's like asking, what is the spatial volume of the number 7?
I love that. It's a completely nonsensical question.
You are taking a physical measurement volume and trying to apply it to a conceptual absolute where it simply doesn't belong. When you assign biological reproduction to an infinite creator, you aren't elevating God. You're severely limiting the limitless by forcing it into a tiny human box.
That strict logical framework naturally leads to one of the most fascinating aspects of this worldview. Its analysis of Jesus, who is known as Isa in Islam. This is a crucial theological crossroads.
It really is. And I think a lot of people don't know this, but a Muslim actually cannot be a Muslim without loving and revering Jesus.
That is absolutely true. He is honored as one of the mightiest prophets, the Messiah, born miraculously to the Virgin Mary by the direct command of God.
The Prophet Muhammad himself actually said he is the closest of all people to the Son of Mary in both this world and the next. It's a relationship of deep spiritual brotherhood.
So the conflict here isn't about whether Jesus was important or whether he performed miracles.
Right, they agree on all that.
Exactly. The conflict is entirely about his metaphysical nature. It argues that taking the title Son of God, which, if you look at the original ancient Hebrew and Aramaic context, was simply a title of honor for a righteous, beloved servant of God like David or Solomon.
Oh, right, it wasn't meant literally.
No, but taking that title and literalizing it through that lens of Greek mythology we discussed earlier, that was a historical tragedy. The deified Jesus actually alienates him from his true, magnificent mission as a completely devoted human servant of the Creator.
And it uses the Bible itself to make this point, which I found incredibly compelling. Like, it asks us to just read the primary texts without the filter of later Roman dogmas.
Yes, let's look at the actual text.
It points directly to Mark 10:18, where a man comes up and calls Jesus good, and Jesus immediately corrects him. He says, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone."
He is establishing a very clear, definitive boundary between himself as a messenger and the absolute Creator.
There's also the event in the Garden of Gethsemane, right?
Right.
From Matthew 26:39.
Yes. In a state of deep anguish before his arrest, Jesus falls with his face to the ground and prays for the cup to pass from him, but concludes, "Not as I will, but as you will."
And this asks a very direct, logical question. If Jesus was the Almighty God incarnate, the supreme being of the universe, to whom exactly was he praying?
Exactly. If you are the omnipotent Creator, you don't fall face down in the dirt to beg for help from yourself.
That act of falling to the ground, of totally submitting your own personal will to the will of the Creator, that is the literal dictionary definition of the word Islam, submission and peace.
By this definition, Jesus was practicing the absolute purest form of submission to the one God.
And this sharp logical distinction brings us to the concept of shirk, right?
Yes, shirk, which is the act of associating partners with God or directing worship to anything other than the Creator.
And there are some pretty intense warnings about this.
Very intense. There are verses describing the heavens nearly tearing apart, the earth splitting open, and the mountains crumbling at the mere claim that the most merciful has taken a son.
Okay, those verses sound terrifying on the surface, but when you look at the framework, it reframes them brilliantly.
How so?
It says we shouldn't read these as emotional threats from an angry, human-like deity throwing a cosmic tantrum because he didn't get enough attention.
Right, it's not about ego.
It's purely cause and effect. It's like a physicist warning you about the event horizon of a black hole. The physicist isn't angry with you. They are just explaining the fundamental laws of gravity. If you ignore the fundamental laws of the universe, there are inevitable, crushing consequences.
That is a perfect way to understand the metaphysical consequences of shirk. By assigning partners to God, a person denies the very architectural principle of existence.
You're going against the grain of reality.
Exactly. You end up worshiping the created, whether that is a profit, money, your own ego, or society's approval, instead of the creator. And in doing so, you sever your own soul's energetic connection to the pure source of life. You isolate yourself.
And this reality isn't just some abstract spiritual concept. It is backed up by the physical universe itself.
Yes, it bridges science and spirituality seamlessly.
Like with modern astrophysics, the finely tuned constants of the universe. This incredible mathematical precision points logically to a single unified planner.
Right. There is a brilliant logical proof presented in chapter 21, verse 22. If there were multiple gods in the heavens and the earth, the universe would be in a state of chaos and ruin.
It makes total sense. Think about how the fundamental forces work. If you had multiple supreme beings, their independent wills would inevitably conflict.
One god might want gravity to operate at a certain constant, while another wants an entirely different thermodynamic law.
Exactly. The absolute mathematical uniformity of the laws of physics, from like the microscopic orbit of electrons all the way up to the macroscopic expansion of galaxies, that is physical proof of a singular, unified lawgiver.
True religion, according to this matrix, never asks you to check your brain at the door. It harmonizes the sharpest scientific intellect with the deepest emotional needs.
But astrophysics only explains the physical reality out there. This absolute unity is also mirrored in here, inside the human experience.
Yes, let's talk about the internal aspect.
There's a famous hadith, a recorded saying of the Prophet Muhammad, stating that there is a piece of flesh in the body, which is the heart. If the heart is healthy, the whole body is healthy. But if the heart is sick, the whole body is sick.
The center of it all.
Right. You can have all the scientific knowledge, all the wealth, and all those temporary apps running smoothly on your hardware. But if that central connection to the singular creator is broken, you will feel entirely empty.
Because that connection is what you were designed for. And this introduces a beautiful concept called fitra.
Fitra.
It's the idea that every single human being is born with a pure, innate disposition to recognize the one true creator. It is essentially your soul's factory-installed spiritual compass.
I love that, a factory-installed compass.
Society, trauma, and complex dogmas might bury it, but the hardware is always there.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? It means that when you are finally exposed to pure monotheism, to the uncorrupted truth, it shouldn't feel like you are learning some strange alien concept.
No, it shouldn't.
It feels like you are remembering something you had long forgotten. Your internal compass naturally aligns with magnetic north. The argument here is that pure monotheism is simply the external, revealed rulebook that perfectly matches this internal, factory-installed programming.
And because it is an alignment of your natural state, there are very specific active steps for you to take. It encourages you to use your intellect, to question inherited dogmas that just don't make logical sense.
Ask for the hard questions.
Exactly. It urges you to read the primary sources directly, like a translation of the Quran, without relying on a filter or a commentator telling you what to think. And most importantly, it calls on you to pray directly to the Creator.
No middlemen.
None. No priests, no saints, no divine mediators. Just you, in the quiet, asking the ultimate source of truth to remove your confusion and guide you.
So, to summarize this entire deep dive, we're looking at a worldview that presents this path not as some exotic cultural identity you have to adopt, but as a return home to your original nature.
A return home. That's exactly it.
It's the uncorrupted, unbroken rope of pure monotheism that has been lowered down through every single era of human history. It's about clearing away the centuries of historical fog, the political influences, and the philosophical distortions to see the singular truth that was always there.
To encapsulate that journey from confusion to clarity, there's a closing prayer, a dua, that the Prophet Muhammad himself frequently used.
Oh, please share it.
It goes, Ya muqallib al-kulub, tabit kalbi ala dinik, which translates to, O turner of hearts, keep my heart firm upon your religion.
That's incredibly powerful.
It is a profound acknowledgement that while we must use our logic and intellect to seek the truth, ultimate guidance, peace, and steadfastness come directly from the Creator.
That brings us to a final provocative thought for you to take away from this deep dive today. We've talked extensively about this fitra, this factory-installed compass that points toward unity, purpose, and the Creator. Think about the world we live in right now. If every human is born with this internal navigation system, what happens to our society when we collectively decide to just, well, ignore it?
That's a heavy question.
It really is. Does the modern epidemic of anxiety, depression, and endless burnout stem from the fact that we are trying to navigate an incredibly complex, chaotic world while actively fighting our own internal compass?
It's certainly worth thinking about.
Today, when the noise finally stops and you have a moment of quiet, I invite you to just sit in that silence. Don't look at your phone, don't turn on a screen, just observe. Where does your internal compass naturally try to point you when the distractions are finally stripped away?